share this with folks that might not be able to have made it. So yes, if you could put name, location, and role into the chat, that would be lovely. And thank you so much for being here. Laura's in Chicago. That's awesome. I was a assistant principal and teacher in Chicago. Aaron from Las Vegas. Wendy, I know you, Washington. Very cool. Since we are recording and just want to be mindful of everybody's time, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Megan so we can get right into it. And some other folks might join us as we're going. We'll see. And thank you all for being here. So Megan Marcus is the founder of FuelED, a nonprofit that grows educator emotional intelligence in relationship-driven schools. Megan holds a bachelor's in psychology from the University of California at Berkeley, a master's degree in psychology from Pepperdine University, and a master's in education policy and management from Harvard's Graduate School of Education. Megan served as a lead researcher on Dr. Luis Cozzolino's book, The Social Neuroscience of Education, which served as the catalyst for launching FuelED in 2012. Megan, over to you.
So great to be here, everyone. It's really wonderful and an honor. I've enjoyed my time that I've gotten to spend with Daniel so far and the community that he's built. So thank you for having me. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen with my PowerPoint. All right. Can y'all see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Welcome to the webinar. It's an honor to be here. The focus for today is on managing teacher overwhelm and uncertainty. You guys are seem to be all in leadership roles, and so not only have you, I'm sure, faced teacher overwhelm and uncertainty, but your own. And I just really want to validate and resonate with that, how stressful and overwhelming of a year and a half that it's been, and we're still very much in the midst of it. And just know how difficult the job of a school leader is right now. So as Daniel said, I'm Megan Marcus. I'll be facilitating our time together. For those who don't know about FuelED, we were founded really to solve a problem in educator preparation. The fact that educators' day-to-day jobs are relationship-based and that learning, it really happens through relationships, and yet so much of an educator's training focuses on instructional knowledge and content skills, instructional skills and content knowledge. And for school leaders, so much of your training focuses on, operations, and there's certainly some people management, but so much of the work of an educator at all levels in the classroom and district is about relationships. And so I thought this was a really big disservice to educators and students when we can really work to develop educators' emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, and self-awareness, and through doing so, create really powerful relationship-driven schools. And that's really how FuelED was founded. I worked with Dr. Luis Cozzolino on his book, which exposed the science of relationships. And I was trained to be a therapist at the same time. And I said, hey, there's this whole field of therapist training, of counselor training with really concrete and practical ways to build relationships. Why can't we just bridge that for practical use by educators? And so that's really why FuelED was founded. And we've been working since 2012 towards this mission. And I've worked with over 15,000 educators across the country. So really grateful to be connecting with you all today. Today's webinar is going to provide time and space for you to understand more about how this global pandemic has impacted educator mental health. Y'all are on the front lines of this and seeing it every day, experiencing it too. But what I hope to provide for you today is to also this turnkey, simple, and scalable support system that can address educator mental health. We all are looking for those solutions that can be implemented right away without a high cost and without a high kind of barrier to implementation. And that's what I hope to present to you today. To best engage with our webinar today, you might want to have a pen and note paper handy. It's quite interactive. And so we're going to be asking you to discuss and to share. There'll be breakout rooms, and we might have you share your insights as a whole group as well. I encourage you to turn on your video so we can kind of get that personal connection, but do encourage you to stay muted unless you're talking, just to manage the noise. And let's pray that my dog and toddler and baby stay quiet too. So we're gonna also share questions and reflections in the chat. You can do that at any time. Hope you guys have a lively discussion there as we continue on. So let's jump in, let's get started. So we're here together because educators across the country have experienced a prolonged state of toxic stress over the course of this pandemic. We all remember it well, March of last year, there was this abrupt transition to distance learning, and educators and school leaders alike were expected to do more and faster than ever. There's a series of research that was done by EdWeek, a research center, and the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence that looked at the impact of COVID on educators. And what they found is that majority of teachers that were surveyed said that their morale was lower than it had been prior to the pandemic, and that teaching has grown more stressful as a result of the pandemic. No big surprise there. The most frequent emotions that educators are feeling each day: anxiety, fear, worry, overwhelm, and sadness. We at FuelED actually just did our own research on this with our educators, and above and beyond, 80% of them were feeling really strong negative emotions, with overwhelmed and exhausted being the number one words that came up. If you think about, in addition to the demands of teaching, educators have experienced also a lot of emotional anguish due to the pandemic and isolation because of the loss of connection with students. Teaching online just isn't what it is to teach in the classroom. In a series of interviews by NPR, every educator said that the hardest part of teaching remotely is that loss of regular contact with students. So one 7th grade teacher from Greensville, South Carolina said, "Teaching through a computer is not why I became a teacher. I became a teacher to build relations with my students, and that one-on-one, face-to-face interaction is what I'm really missing." Robin Nelson is a first grader, says that a first grader in her class at Ortega Elementary School recently surprised her. She left little love notes and pictures on my doorstep, and Nelson really recalled this through tears, that's the heartbreaking part. You're not a teacher if you can't be with your kids. Computers, they're not your teacher. So I think there's this piece of losing a critical part of their identity, what gives educators meaning and value in their vocation, essentially, and that's a huge loss that took place over the last year, and a lot of grief and anxiety and stress are really remaining from that, even for those educators who've now made it back to the classroom. And I think another big thing that happened to educators over the last year and a half is losing critical connection, not just to students, but administrators, who also struggled with lower morale while also being flooded with emergency planning, meeting students' basic needs, now trying to catch up and design new school procedures. And unfortunately, even though principals have reported staff to take care of teachers' morale, the way that teachers experience this reality was really different than the way that principals reported it. So in other words, teachers aren't necessarily feeling the love. 96% of principals say they've addressed teacher morale during the pandemic, but only 72% of teachers say the same. 88% of principals say they've encouraged group connection for teachers, but only 37% of teachers say the same. And then lastly, 37% of principals say that teachers have been offered special perks since the closures, but only 13% of teachers say the same. All of this is according to research studies done by the EdWeek Research Center. And what all of this really tells us is that our best efforts as school leaders to care for teachers may not be landing right now for whatever reason. Unfortunately, as students do return to school and things come hopefully back to the new normal, teachers will continue to be asked to do more with less financial resources, perhaps more importantly, less emotional resources, not only their own emotional resources, but also from you as their administrators. So clearly the mental health of educators is at risk, and we need to also avoid further disruptions that can be caused by teacher burnout and teacher turnover. We all know the statistics on teacher burnout and turnover, with 30% of teachers leaving within their first 5 years. And this costs an exorbitant amount, $7 billion per year for the nation, but it could cost $4,000 to $17,000 per teacher per year at the school or district level. But now, due to COVID, an additional 12% of teachers are reporting that they might leave, even though they weren't planning to do so before the crisis. And of course, this problem doesn't just impact our bottom lines financially, but of course, students too. Research shows that teachers who personally struggle with mental health and depression, stress and anxiety will have a negative performance impact on student performance and the classroom environment. So clearly we are very much in need of a sustainable system of care for educator well-being. And that's exactly why we're gathered here together today. What I want to teach you about is how to build a sustainable, innovative, and powerful approach to educator support and care in your school or district. But before I really share, and instruct about this method, I want you to have a sense of its benefits, to experience it firsthand. And so that's what we're going to do with our next activity. In a moment, you're going to be paired up in a breakout room with a partner. And one person, you'll have two roles. One person will be the speaker. One person will be the listener. And you'll have the opportunity to play both roles as we'll switch halfway through. So the speaker is going to go first with sharing a real problem. So everyone, just take a moment to think about a real problem, something that's needling at you right now in your real life, personal or professional. And it needs to be something that you feel, of course, comfortable sharing with the group because it's a real problem, but also something with a bit of substance that you can kind of speak about for a bit of time, because you're going to be speaking for 3 minutes straight. The listener's job while you're speaking is to listen and to take notes on a few specific things. You're going to be listening for the thoughts, feelings, needs, problems, and values of the speaker. You're not interrupting, you're not talking back. You're actually just listening through that frame and taking notes on those different components that you hear. Even though they might not say directly their feelings or their needs, you're trying to listen behind the words for each of those things. As a listener, again, you're zipping your mouth, you're not responding, you're not talking during those 3 minutes, just documenting what you hear. And then when you finish those 3 minutes, you could pause, take a moment to capture the rest of your notes, and then it's your time to share. What you're sharing is actually exactly what you heard. So in the feelings category, I heard these feelings. In the thoughts category, I heard these thoughts. And needs, I heard these. You're sharing back what you heard in those categories. And the speaker can say what you got right and what you got wrong. I wasn't exactly sad, I was more mad, right? So then you get feedback on how you did at really listening. After that whole exercise is done, you're going to switch roles and repeat. Take a moment right now. Basically what we're going to be doing is activating this tool that FuelED uses called the perspectrum. It helps us understand the spectrum of things that make up another person's perspective: problems, feelings, needs, thoughts, and values. So to organize those different kind of components that make up another person's perspective, take a moment right now with pen and paper to copy down this chart. You don't need to write the instructions at the top or the title of the perspectrum, but just make sure you get all the categories there, and you can write it in a little T-chart: problems, feelings, needs, thoughts, and values. I'll give you just a minute to copy that down. All right, while you're finishing that up, I'm going to pull up the instructions again and just chat it out in case anyone needs a refresher, or let me see, am I stopped sharing? Yeah, I'm stopped sharing. In case anyone needs a refresher during the exercise, and you can always just pull this up. So make sure you grab it while it's in the chat. Okay, we can move to breakout rooms. Although I think we lost everyone to group. Any insights? Oh, thanks, Danny. So we're just going to jump into discussion about the protocol we just did, using the perspectum to listen to one another. Love to hear from the group what insights you had from doing that exercise. You could speak from the perspective of being the speaker or the listener.
I think it was nice. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, I think it was nice to kind of break it apart in its kind of relevant pieces. It kind of forces you to, I think when we go into conversations, we try to be active listeners, and we try to kind of listen to the other perspective. But it was nice for me to kind of break down, okay, this is a feeling versus this is a value versus this is like the problem itself. And I think that helped me identify kind of what the problem was a little bit better than if I'm just trying to generally listen actively kind of thing.
Yeah, so Scott felt like that having the different categories just helped create a bit more focus, this different framework through which to listen, created more clarity and almost more disciplined listening.
Yeah.
Awesome. Others?
I would agree. I think I'm inherently, and I don't hate this about myself, but I don't enjoy it about myself sometimes, but I'm a fixer. So I'm always looking for what can I fix? And, and I felt like in this, I didn't feel that pressure of feeling like I need to. Now, of course, if someone asks my opinion, I have one, of course, but I didn't feel the pressure of like trying to find the thing and then what can I do to help and what can I do to fix it and what can I do? I just was really listening, and so that was really relaxing.
Yes, I love what you're saying, Melissa, because it's like when someone brings us a problem as fixers, like it almost spikes our anxiety or like performance anxiety, like gotta investigate, gotta analyze, but you had a job, like a different job to do. And that helped you put the other stuff aside. You didn't feel as responsible for solving it, but instead say, no, I'm supposed to be taking notes on what I'm hearing. And then you could just kind of relax into that. That's super neat. Other insights into what it felt like to either listen in that way, or what did it feel like to be heard in that way?
Well, it's pretty neat, first of all, just to highlight again, if you could be a leader and feel relaxed while you're listening, and not only is that great for you, but for the person you're serving in that moment, they could probably pick up on that energy, that you're not, your wheels, the wheels start spinning, they see it in your eyes, you're thinking, okay, let me figure out, this is the solution. And so anyways, I felt great sharing it because the issue that I'm facing with the home, that's going to be a big one to figure out, and just to have a space, right, to put it out there, and get it, not keep it inside, is super helpful. Then that reflecting back piece is powerful too. This is an incredible tool for active listening for sure.
Yeah. So what did it feel like when you did, either Danny or Melissa, when folks did start to name those different things from your experience? What was that like for you?
Well, I think it was just, like I said, it was a little bit affirming, but it also made me kind of see it, and it helps like process some things, and helps you like just talking through it too. I always tell my folks I'm a verbal processor. Like, let me just keep going, and I'll get there. I will get there eventually. But I have to talk through it, and so I think that part was good. But also, like say, hearing that back was, and hearing some things that I hadn't said, but you guys picked up on was super cool for me.
Yeah, so two things at play. One is like when we give folks that space, like enough space to just talk without interrupting, without fixing, they can make sense of their own experiences and start solving their own problems. And then when we do go take it further and we reflect back to them, we're almost like serving as this external processor for them. We're helping them organize their experiences just by mirroring back what we heard, and folks can get to more of feelings of regulation and clarity and problem solving from that place. So super powerful. Any other insights on what you noticed or saw? Alrighty, you keep them moving then. I did send out a little sign-in sheet in the chat. We'll send resources from this session afterwards if you want to sign in there while I'm getting my screen share going again.
Yeah, while you're screen sharing, a lot of people signed up for this webinar, and I know that as well, most likely people will be watching the replay. So we'll link up the sign-in sheet also, because Megan is an incredible resource, and you probably want to start a conversation there on how you can serve your staff and just be smarter about what we're talking about here today. And so anyways, that'll be linked up on YouTube in the description area, or if you're watching on the replay and you got the email from me, then that'll be in the email too. So it's kind of weird saying that, right? It's like meta in some ways, because we have 3 wonderful school leaders here in front of us, and there's hundreds, probably thousands that this webinar will impact once we hit publish. So thank you so much for serving, Megan.
Pleasure. So what I want to share next is that even though all the stress we talked about at the beginning of this webinar, from traumatic experiences, like those that your teachers, your students, maybe even yourself have experienced during COVID, it can negatively impact our psychological and physical health and cause impaired brain functioning, as well as hurt our ability to interact and connect with others. Science also tells us that it's relationships that heal. And specifically, it's relationships that make us feel safe, soothed, secure, and seen. And so that's really just a tiny bit of what you just experienced, the way in which that relationship can serve as this kind of, that relationship and that listening, that deep listening can serve as this almost like soothing balm, right? That even though the problems haven't gone away, maybe Melissa and Danny would say they feel calmer about it, they feel more in control about it, even though nothing changed, because they've had that opportunity to feel heard. And how does that really work? Well, when we're understood by another person, essentially, we start feeling safer to share. We begin to open up more. Our feelings and our darkest thoughts are accepted, and that feels good. Something that we held inside before that felt scary and shameful now has been let out in the light and really embraced with open arms. Oh, nothing wrong with that, those fears that you're having. Like, yeah, those are very valid. Those are normal. So now what basically happens is a traumatic experiences becomes linked to a positive experience of that validation, of that connection. And the whole thing feels less scary. We feel less alone. Basically, the brain chemistry starts to change and new neural pathways are created so we can move beyond the traumatic experience and start operating from a new perspective. So in other words, what I'm basically saying here is that it's through empathic connection and relationships that can calm and heal stress and trauma. And so you might be wondering, how can I bring empathic connection and relationships to scale in my school or district as a way to ease teacher overwhelm, stress, and the trauma caused by COVID? And the next section of our time together is going to really help you do just that. Figure out how to build the sustainable and powerful network of relationships that promote educator support, care, and well-being. And we at FuelED call it stewardship. So what is the stewardship system? Essentially, in order to promote educator well-being, educators need relationships that can provide them with regular and consistent experiences of feeling seen, heard, and valued. And that's exactly what stewardship does. What is it? It's a practice where educators pair with their peers to provide each other with that ongoing care and support. These are relationship spaces where educators can receive for themselves the kind of care that they often only provide others, for their students or perhaps their peers. It's a place to share stresses, problems, and pain to be met with empathic communication and connection, just the kind of empathic connection that you just received in a short, 5-minute exercise. So here's what folks are saying about stewardship. Without stewardship, I wouldn't take an hour to do this work or be as reflective as I am. There's no other time in my week where I can speak uninterrupted about something emotional, sorry, my face is covering the word, emotional weight. It's made me a better person to be around. It's a pressure release valve. It's good for my mental health. It makes me more conscious in my relationships, particularly with my kids. It encouraged me just to stop talking and listen. So you can see there the inherent value this has to the educator, but also the way that it's actually started to impact his or her relationships with kiddos and the culture that this educator brings into the classroom. It's really modeling something for her, filling up her cup so then this educator can go and provide that for the students as well. So here's some ways that stewardship supports educators. It reduces stress and increases emotional regulation and wellness. It provides them as a listening ear so that they can explore relationships, helps them meet their personal or professional goals, make sure they commit to doing the things they want to do, right? A little bit of accountability, process their emotions to prepare for difficult conversations outside of stewardship. So we implement stewardship at my company, and a lot of times you get annoyed with your coworkers, you're frustrated about something personal or professional, and most of the time people just kind of bury that. But with stewardship, it's actually a safe person I could process with, unpack it, realize what's my stuff. Like, okay, that has to do with my relationship with my mom, nothing to do with this person. But actually, this is a really practical feedback that I need to bring to them. And it helps me kind of prepare myself, get calm and ready to deliver feedback or have hard conversations, because it's kind of this like incubation space for those more difficult conversations. And then lastly, it's an opportunity to practice being honest and genuine. So most people aren't really used to talking vulnerably and bringing their whole self to work. But with the stewardship system, you develop a safety in one relationship where you can begin to practice bringing more of your whole self to the workplace. And it's really powerful because then it begins to ripple out. Now for a little bit about how it works. So stewardship is that stewards meet weekly for an hour and they take turns providing one another care and support. So the way they take turns is by alternating roles. So each session, the steward alternates being the one listening and the one sharing, kind of like you guys had different roles in that exercise. Similarly, if it's, week 1 of the month, I'm the steward and I'm here to listen to you. Let's say Danny's my stewardee and he comes up ready to share a real problem. My job is just to listen deeply, not to share anything myself. And then the next week, it's going to be my turn. I can share all my stuff and then Danny's going to be the one listening deeply. So that's essentially how it works in terms of the sharing the roles. And now I'm going to play a brief clip of a couple team members, myself included, in a real stewardship session. So you can just see what this might look and feel like in real time. Make sure I hope my volume is up. Let's see. You guys hear?
No, I think you got to hit share. So like unshare your screen.
Okay.
Think about all that's going on in my liminal space right now.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Of being between and betwixt is how it feels here at FuelED and like in the world and in life. It's like all of a sudden my home is transformed, like my children are here, as you just experienced, selling worms. And I think I guess 2 points I've discovered in the last few days of like everything that we've kind of gone through at FuelED is just that I had this this pretty intense moment of shame and guilt because I realized I was giving way more emotionally at work than at home. Yeah. And this hypothesis that my children are avoidant enough to deal with it, which just is hit in the heart.
Yeah, that must have felt really heavy. It sounds like the awareness hit you all at once.
Yeah, on Friday.
Broke through something.
Right. I mean, it happened when I was walking and talking and processing Friday's meeting when I was just so angry, heart pounding, as close as I get to yelling at people, which apparently is not very close. It was just this realization of why am I doing this? This feels boundaryless and toxic and healthy, imbalanced. And why?
Yeah. It was resentment, but almost kind of a lot of distaste too. Ugh.
Yeah.
I don't want to be part of this. Why am I so wrapped up in this?
Exactly. It really, that feeling of how have I landed here? And the confusion too of just the paradox of having an open, healthy in some ways culture with the reality of the work, the emotional work of that.
Yeah, that's complex because on one hand you're I really value the openness here and the relationships here, but then it's this feels too complicated and too messy and I don't want anything to do with it. It's there's that approach and avoid going on with it.
For sure. Yeah. because there is that realization that if I were in a different work environment, I probably would just like harbor a lot internally, knowing my attachment style, that I would just be dealing with things on the inside and like growing less. So it's this paradox, because on Friday, like I grew because of the culture, because I'm pissed at the culture.
Right. Right. Because on Friday you were honest and it pushed you to be honest, but then you were just like, you were wiped out.
So wiped out, like more wiped out than felt really up until this morning. I mean, yesterday, you know, we had this marathon situation.
Yeah.
And I was like digging deep.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm good at that and can do that. Like
Right.
I can show up and do it.
Right. Yeah. You were powering through, like you said, that's your tendency to power through.
Yeah. Power through, run. Well, and Mary Helen was like, yeah, you do that a lot.
Yeah. Thing you know about yourself, but having it mirrored back by one of your kids, that was probably painful.
Yeah, it was really sad.
All right, little example. You get to go deep into the inner worlds of our organization, but that's a real example of stewardship. Just a clip from one of our sessions last year. So you get a sense of what it's about and the way in which we train educators to respond to one another and to provide those types of spaces for one another. So if you want to try out stewardship, I'm going to give you some tips to get started. And then if you use that sign-in form in the chat, we'll send you an additional resource about implementing stewardship that'll have a lot of this information in it. So make sure you sign in. So setting up a stewardship system, what you would want to do is, of course, get educators' consent for who would want to be involved, and then pair them up and set up a system where they cycle. We recommend a semester pairing we do every 6 months. And that way it becomes part of the culture where all can benefit and build relationships across the school. You might even have someone besides you be the point person in terms of the matchmaking and then like kind of managing and supporting the system. That's how we do it on our team. There's a stewardship captain who every 6 months does the repairings, but they're also responsible for any process improvements or receiving feedback about the system if it's working or not working. That's a way to kind of not add another thing to your plate and empower educators on the ground to really own this practice. Of course, this is where we need administrators' help. Y'all are in charge of the schedules. Identify time and space for it to happen. This is the biggest challenge we hear amongst all our educators is time and space for relationships and for their own growth. And so the more you can prioritize that through actions that actually carve out time and space in the calendar for them to do it. So it's not one additional thing, but really slot it out for them. That's going to go a huge way. So we recommend an hour a week for the practice to maintain consistency and allow for greater impact. Adjust schedules, build space for this. And then finally, secure professional development for your staff and empathic communication. I don't recommend setting this up without that foundational skills training in empathic listening. It's really, really important. Otherwise, people's natural tendencies are to go towards fixing or trying to cheer up, and that can actually feel really dismissive and invalidating and create more of a lack of safety rather than a reparative, safe experience. So really important to build your staff skill in empathic communication before trying this at home. And now if you're an educator or don't necessarily have the power to change schedules, there's a way for you can certainly get started with this yourself. So you can identify relationships as an individual who you could steward with. Who do you work closely with on your campus? Select a coworker or present this to a group or a team you work with, like a PLS, to begin the process of pairing and setting up time for yourself. Establish a cadence for your time. Again, you want to commit to it weekly. Take turns being the listener and the speaker. And finally, really secure that professional development for yourself and your partners so that you can make sure that you have the skills necessary to help each other feel safe and seen. As we are coming to the end of our time here, I do want to highlight a few of our programs that could help you do this if you did want to engage in learning about how to develop your own empathic communication, learn about how to be set up a stewardship system. One of our programs, this is actually our flagship program, is called the Whole Educator Collective. And it's currently online. We are going back to in-person as well when the time is right. But it's really all about developing the interpersonal skills, the self-awareness, and the emotional well-being necessary to build relationships and a relationship-driven school. A lot of it focuses on the science of attachment and trauma, so you can get that new knowledge base, as well as growing your skills in empathic communication, genuine communication, and finally deepening your self-awareness around what are your triggers? What's your early childhood experiences that might be getting in the way of you building secure relationships? And then finally, at the end of this training, we actually teach the educators in the training how to build a stewardship network. So imagine this workshop, but way more blown out with practice with stewardship and more logistical support on how to build stewardship into your system. And then for those who don't have as much time or budget for that longer training, Empathy School is also a really great option. It's a one-day training on the art and science of effective listening. So you don't get as much of the science about trauma or attachment, and you don't get all of the skills such as genuineness, but you do really focus deep in the skill of empathic communication, and not as much on the deep self-awareness, but people get a lot of self-awareness in terms of just reflecting on their own practice and what their barriers to empathy are. So that's a really great option as well. And finally, we'd love to just be in touch, stay connected. We have free webinars all the time, just like this one. So you can visit our website to stay involved. Definitely sign up with the sign-in sheet that I provided. And I'm also going to share out a little feedback form now that we'd love your feedback and to hear from you and stay in touch. So the sign-in form you have in there, please fill that out, and I'm grabbing the feedback form. Since we do have a few more minutes, something that we do at FuelED is checkouts, closeout rounds, and this is another way to get your guys' feedback. So feel free to use the form and or engage in our closeout. But Danny, you're welcome to keep this rolling or cut it, but basically would love everyone to kind of close out and just share kind of how they're leaving the space, either how you're feeling or any feedback that you have or insight that you gained. So Danny, do you want to kick us off with your checkout?
Grateful for you showing up and providing value. So like I said, 3 amazing school leaders here and all that will be watching the replay. I learned some things, in terms of effective active listening and the stewardship model I'm super interested in. I'm curious, when we talked on the podcast with that principal that transforms stuff with the one-on-one, was she using the stewardship model, or do you remember what I'm talking about?
I do. That was before we implemented the formal concept of stewardship to educators, but she had been through the whole educator collective and learned about empathic listening using the spectrum, and then just kind of through her own initiative developed what is functionally stewardship.
Got it. And then the last piece for my checkout would just be watching you do that with your teammate. And since you're the founder, there was obvious psychological safety there, that she could say things that she was frustrated about. At least that's what I heard within the organization. But she even noted how it made her grow. And I was just really blown away that you could have that type of candid conversation with essentially your boss, I guess, And so that was pretty cool. And I just want to say thanks for that too.
Thanks, Danny. Demetrius, would you like to check out?
Sure. I appreciate you providing an example. I think that's one of the most challenging things about being a leader in general, is like, okay, I need to see this actually work. So thank you for providing that example. I think, the time that we're entering this coming school year, it's so necessary for us to be able to create spaces where our students or our staff feel safe and able to express how they're feeling without judgment or someone coming to fix the problem.
Thank you. Melissa?
I just think this comes at a perfect time for me personally for reconnecting. My staff is we're moving into a brand new building. Right now we're spread out into 5 separate buildings, and we're moving into 1 2-story building. It's being finished next week, and so we're super excited about that. So we're trying to. The big thing we've all been talking about is how we can all connect, because I have teachers who have never really spoken to each other because they're all in separate buildings, and especially during this year with Zooms, everything. So so some of this stuff comes at a perfect time for us to build this, into our culture as a group now that we're going to be all together. So this is perfect timing. So thank you very much.
Great. Last but not least, Scott.
I think I kind of fall in the same category as Melissa a little bit. And this past year was our first year in like this as a school. Our district did some restructuring, and we combined teachers from 6 different schools to create one school. And it was awesome, and it was a phenomenal first year. But like there's definitely some relational things, especially and we kind of went through at the end of the year and kind of reflected as a staff on some of the great things that happened this year, and then all of the like kind of obstacles that we overcame together as a staff. And you're talking about building a singular mission and vision from 5 different cultures, 6 different cultures that they came from, and that was really, it was a unique and exciting experience. But we had to do it all kind of at arm's length with all of our COVID protocols and all of that kind of stuff in place. And so like there was definitely a big, like they're doing the nuts and bolts like really well. Like they came together. I mean, we're working through our mission and vision, and my staff stepped up in a major way, and they were doing great. But as I was reflecting with my assistant principal at the end of the year, like there's definitely some relational pieces that are missing, and some of that is being able to have that safe conversation, that ability to kind of share what's on your mind. And we do, we try to do every year, at least twice a year, where I do one-on-ones. And I got about 80 staff members that are on my teaching staff, and we try to do one-on-one meetings with all of them to give them that space. And my former staff was very comfortable with like, okay, I got some issues, like we've got some things that we need to work on. How can we work through this? And we had that relationship because we've been working together for a period of time. My new staff, they, like either everything is going really well, or they have not yet felt comfortable coming in and having those conversations candidly with me. So I think that perspective, I think, will help me kind of shift the way that I interact with them during those one-on-ones, so to hopefully open up more doors for them to be comfortable in that setting. So thank you.
Thank you. I love it. Thank you for sharing each of your like personal experiences in terms of where you are and how you're integrating this. That's super helpful and motivating for me to hear. And I definitely, I'm so excited about the potential for this to like give teachers more than twice a year opportunities for one-on-ones. And then
absolutely, when
they do have the chance to meet with you, like it's going to elevate so many more problems that you will be able to help address. And Demetrius, I also love what you said about having an example. And I think like for us at FuelED, maybe we can, start showing it even more, showcasing it more. I think Danny had an idea for how we can record something like that, a little micro learning conversation. So look out for more between FuelED and Better Leaders, Better Schools. I have a feeling it's the beginning of a great relationship, and I'm really grateful for all of you. Thank you for having me here, Danny. It's been really tremendous, and good luck to each of you. Please feel free to be in touch. We'll reach out to you with that resource, and we'd love to partner with your schools if we can be of service.
Great. Just 4 things in closing that I'll get in 30 seconds. So Melissa, Demetrius, Scott, thank you for coming, because having live human beings to talk with and serve is, what fills our cups. So, and thank you for how you're serving your communities. We need educators and leaders like you. So, everybody wins when a leader gets better. Megan, thank you for sharing all the value like you did. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss any content. And then there are the 2 links Megan talked about for sign-in and feedback, so you can get the resources she created for this presentation. So thanks, everyone, and go make a ruckus.